Trump halts Canada trade talks over tariff case interference. President Donald Trump said Friday he was terminating trade talks with Canada after an Ontario government television ad used audio from a 1987 Ronald Reagan address to criticize tariffs. Trump called the ad fake, alleging it misrepresented Reagan's views and attempted to sway a pending Supreme Court case on his tariff authority. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation said the spot mischaracterized the speech and was used without permission. Ontario officials denied wrongdoing and said the clip was a lawful excerpt from a public address. The dispute lands just as the Supreme Court prepares to hear Learning Resources versus Trump on November 5, a case that will decide whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act allows the president to impose broad tariffs. Lower courts have previously ruled against the administration's interpretation. Trump's move underscores the political stakes surrounding U.S. tariff policy and cross-border trade. While Canada seeks to keep channels open, the immediate future of negotiations is unclear. Both sides now face heightened domestic scrutiny as legal arguments proceed and businesses brace for prolonged uncertainty.
The grifter-in-chief again demonstrating his pettiness.
Trump says it's a fake? What a joke he is. He has no idea of American history.
Trump is unstable. He rules by fit. He is a clear and present danger to this country.
Worst president ever.
Only Trump would alienate our friends in Canada and roll out the red carpet for Russia. Brilliant.
Thank you, President Trump. The viewers of this ad has just gone up 10 times globally. Money well spent. Way to go, Doug Ford.
A cognitively declining narcissistic psychopath with no empathy, remorse, impulse control or a conscience with the powers of the U.S. presidency, surrounded by sycophantic cabinet members, will be a disaster for all humanity.
All trade negotiations terminated, a good start.
Trump is the biggest snowflake of all.
ICE places recruits in training before full vetting. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has advanced some recruits into training before completing full vetting, according to current and former Homeland Security officials, who cited cases of missing fingerprint submissions, unfinished drug screening, and disqualifying criminal histories discovered after entry. Officials said several trainees also failed to meet physical or academic standards once at the academy. The agency is racing to expand its ranks to support President Donald Trump's mass deportation agenda, drawing more than 150,000 applicants amid incentives that include signing bonuses of up to $50,000. In this surge, ICE has streamlined portions of its training pipeline. While the core deportation officer course traditionally runs about 13 weeks, some recent cohorts have followed accelerated schedules. DHS maintains that all hires must still clear required health, drug, and background checks. Critics warn that rushing vetting risks placing unqualified officers in high-stakes roles. ICE says problematic candidates are being removed during training and that most recruits are experienced law enforcement professionals subject to ongoing scrutiny.
Does this surprise anybody? To be an ICE agent, cruelty and racism are the only qualifications. No wonder I can't get a government job. Looks like I need to be a criminal or have had drug issues in order to get in.
Grossly unqualified, that's a job requirement for this admin.
If our president is a criminal, he pardons criminals, his cabinet members are criminals. Why would he care if ICE agents are clean?
How utterly unsurprising and predictable.
Criminals recruiting criminals, yeah, sounds about right.
South Park was on point.
That's because they're criminals.
Is this surprising?
I'm sorry, but that's exactly who the administration wants in there. They want amoral individuals with questionable backgrounds enticed by high pay in order to do awful things.
Federal agents arrest 9 in Chinatown raid, sparking protests. Federal agents carried out a targeted operation on Manhattan's Canal Street on Tuesday, October 21, detaining 9 West African migrants in a crackdown tied to counterfeit street vending. The sweep, led by Immigration and Customs Enforcement with federal partners, was described as intelligence-driven. Scuffles broke out as protesters tried to block vehicles, and several demonstrators were arrested near the federal immigration complex in Lower Manhattan. Officials did not release the detainees' identities or charges. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons defended the action, saying New Yorkers should expect more intelligence-driven arrests and that several detainees had lengthy criminal histories, including forgery, narcotics offenses, and assault. City and state officials condemned the raid as heavy-handed and fear-inducing, arguing it diverted resources and undermined trust in immigrant communities. Immigration enforcement also loomed over the city's final mayoral debate on Wednesday, October 22, where candidates clashed over cooperation with federal authorities and public safety. With legal questions and political scrutiny mounting, agencies offered few additional details beyond confirming the 9 detentions and ongoing investigations tied to counterfeit goods networks.
Honestly, ICE is not doing enough. They're just too nice with these people. All politicians that promote not removing illegal migrant need to be removed from holding any office.
Arresting people for a crime is not violence.
So when Obama deported over 3 million people, do you think they voluntarily turned themselves in? Or do you think he had to send federal resources to go and get them? Where was the outrage then?
9 arrests? We need to put a few zeros behind those numbers to get anything done.
Illegal vendors, not street vendors. I wish they could make more arrests.
I voted for this. Great job, ICE.
As a New Yorker, thank you, ICE.
I am very happy with it. Deport all of them. Stay safe, ICE.
Colombian president's remarks prompt U.S. aid halt. Colombian President Gustavo Petro sparked controversy in a Univision interview aired this week by saying humanity should get rid of President Donald Trump if he refuses to change course. Petro later clarified on X that he meant U.S. voters should replace Trump through democratic means. In response, Trump called Petro a thug and announced a halt to U.S. aid and new trade measures, accusing Colombia of failing to curb narcotics production. The dispute has intensified amid expanded U.S. maritime strikes on alleged drug trafficking vessels in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. Since early September, at least 10 operations have been acknowledged, with a cumulative death toll of no fewer than 43. U.S. officials say the campaign targets transnational criminal networks. Colombia has protested that at least one strike killed a Colombian fisherman and may have occurred in its waters, claims Washington disputes. Trump has framed the effort as a non-international armed conflict with cartels and has not ruled out land operations. Venezuela's government has condemned the actions as unlawful and destabilizing.
For the record, I was just in Colombia and talked to hundreds of people, and everyone, literally everyone in Colombia hates their president and openly admits he was the worst mistake in their history. And that says a lot.
Why would Colombia get bent out of shape, unless we are sinking product that is indeed theirs? I'm Colombian, and believe me, this man does not represent the Colombian people. His disapproval and unpopularity rates are tremendously high. Don't pay attention to what he says. He does not reflect the Colombian people at all. The fact that he threatened the President of the United States should be enough for the U.S. military special ops to enter Colombia and arrest him for international courts to determine if he threatened the life of a sitting U.S. president. Colombia's threat is like a chihuahua barking at a Doberman.
The Colombian president better hope his bunker is deep enough.
Reaper drone incoming.
Colombia mad their product at bottom of ocean. These governments just expose themselves as being in bed with narcos.
U.S. Department of War strikes alleged drug boat. The U.S. Department of War said it conducted another strike against an alleged drug-running vessel this week as the administration expands maritime operations beyond the Caribbean. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed 2 East Pacific strikes on October 22 and 23 that killed 5 people, bringing the campaign's death toll to at least 37 at that time. On October 24, a subsequent operation in the Caribbean killed 6 more, raising the total to at least 43 across 10 incidents since early September. Officials have not released the identities or nationalities of those killed, the specific narcotics involved, or the munition used. President Donald Trump has argued the United States is engaged in a non-international armed conflict with transnational drug organizations and has not ruled out future land operations. Some lawmakers continue to question the legal basis and strategic value of the strikes. Derek Maltz, who served earlier this year as acting administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration, has endorsed aggressive supply-side measures while urging a whole-of-government approach that also targets demand through prevention, treatment, and education.
Together against terrorism and drugs cartels.
USA 8 criminals 0. It's an entire new game.
If you are doing 90 miles per hour in a fast boat on the ocean headed toward the USA, you are not fishing.
Venezuelan here, and congrats to the US for having a real president looking out for his own people.
No U.S. forces were harmed, is the best part.
If that's a fishing boat, then my base boat is a cruise ship.
Kablamo, tax dollars well spent. Keep blasting them out of the water before they even get here. America is back. Hunter Biden is very angry.
Yes, get them all.
Russia warns EU over frozen asset plan as leaders fail to agree on Ukraine loan. Russia warned it would deliver a painful response if the European Union moves ahead with a plan to leverage profits from frozen Russian assets to back an approximately €140 billion loan for Ukraine, after EU leaders failed to reach agreement at a Brussels summit. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova called any such move theft, said it would be null and void, without Moscow's consent, and argued it would damage investor confidence in Europe. The proposal, framed by EU officials as using interest income rather than confiscating principal, remains under discussion. Belgium, where most Russian central bank reserves are immobilized at Euroclear, demanded robust legal guarantees and risk-sharing before supporting the plan, citing exposure to litigation and potential financial instability. Leaders asked the European Commission to refine options for a decision expected in December. Washington has encouraged Allied support for Kyiv but has not committed to the EU's specific loan mechanism, even as G7 members explore channeling asset-generated interest to existing programs. With battlefield needs mounting, the impasse underscores legal and political hurdles that could shape Europe's long-term financing for Ukraine.
Main culprits are EU, UK, France, Germany. They want ruin Russia to ashes, but it won't happen.
Thank you, dear Maria. We have to be honest. The EU's intentions to steal funds belonging to Russia indicates low moral standards of Brussels and EU leaders, but consistent with what the EU and NATO have shown themselves to be. Unfortunately, Russia has no reason to trust the leaders of NATO, the EU, the US, or Britain. This is simply because the West has broken all its promises and agreements and continues to lie about the war in Ukraine.
Brussels equals tyranny, Kyiv equals corruption.
Belgium need to grow a spine and say no to the corrupt EU. The risk to Belgium and its taxpayers is enormous. The ECB also says no.
The EU will be bankrupt next year.
Thievery if wrong, no matter how they try to justify it. It will hurt them even if Russia does nothing. Other countries outside of Europe will take notice of what they did to Russia's assets and will likely withdraw their assets or not even invest money into EU in the first place.
We are being governed by Canaanite pirates. WHO are on their last legs, the fall in the fall.
Zelensky, lend me billions of dollars that you can take from someone else. I will pay you back when pigs fly.
Trump is the only one WHO has any common sense.
Trump hasn't betrayed Europe, he may just have saved us from self-destructing.
Venezuelan President Maduro cites U.S. threat, displays Russian missiles. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro said his country has deployed 5,000 Russian-made Igla-S man-portable air defense missiles to deter what he called a growing U.S. military threat. He described recent U.S. naval movements in the Caribbean as a military encirclement aimed at removing him from power. Washington has expanded a 2-month maritime campaign against suspected drug smuggling vessels, confirming 2 additional strikes in the eastern Pacific this week that killed 5 people, the first outside the Caribbean. U.S. officials say at least 10 operations since early September have left no fewer than 43 dead, arguing the goal is to deny criminal networks the use of sea routes. They have not released the identities of the deceased or evidence of specific narcotics on board. President Donald Trump has authorized covert CIA operations targeting the Maduro government but has not announced ground deployments. Caracas, which insists the missiles are purely defensive, warns that further U.S. escalation would threaten regional stability as Latin American governments debate the legality and risks of the maritime campaign.
Wonderful, overthrow this illegitimate narco president.
Trump must deal with this dictator's close friend, Lula.
If Russia had all that to give Venezuela, it wouldn't be getting its ass kicked by Ukraine.
This guy is bipolar or something, totally childish behavior. A disgrace to the Venezuelan people.
Thank you God, I survived this chaotic world to see a terrorist 4 ask for peace.
Hopefully one day this will happen here in Brazil.
KKKKK. Have you tuned in yet? Wasn't it that idiot who said earlier that he had missiles to compete with the US?
He's gone mad.
Wasn't he the one who said, "Come at me, you coward"? Ha ha ha, the lion turned into a kitten.
Lula wraps Indonesia visit, arrives in Malaysia amid ASEAN Summit Week. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva concluded a state visit to Jakarta on Thursday, October 23, after holding talks with Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto and announcing his intention to seek re-election in 2026. Both leaders pledged to deepen a strategic partnership and advance new cooperation in agriculture, energy, and technology, while Lula reiterated his call for BRICS nations to expand the use of local currencies in trade. Lula arrived in Malaysia on Saturday, October 25, for an official visit that coincides with the 47th ASEAN Summit and related meetings in Kuala Lumpur. His program includes engagements at ASEAN-related forums and outreach to regional investors. Brazilian and Malaysian officials said a possible meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines remains under consideration, but no bilateral has been confirmed. The Asia swing underscores Brazil's bid to diversify trade ties and align with Southeast Asia's growth agenda, as Brasilia and Jakarta explore a comprehensive economic partnership and both governments highlight shared positions on multilateralism and sustainable development.
Our president is the best leader in Brazil.
Welcome to Indonesia. Greetings from the capital city of Indonesia, Nusantara.
How nice to see how loved our president is by others in the country.
As an Indonesian, I hope the Brazil-Indonesia friendship will endure forever.
Lulina did it.
Brazil represented itself with excellence. Imagine if Bolsonaro and Machek had this much class. I'm proud of this representation.
Wow, amazing.
U.S. strikes hit suspected drug boats in the Eastern Pacific. The U.S. military confirmed 2 strikes against suspected drug smuggling boats in the Eastern Pacific on Tuesday and Wednesday, killing 5 people in the first operations outside the Caribbean since the campaign began in early September. War Secretary Pete Hegseth said the vessels ignored warnings and were linked to narco-terrorist networks. Officials did not provide evidence regarding the nationalities of the dead or the specific narcotics involved. These actions form part of a rapidly expanding maritime offensive. After earlier strikes in the Caribbean, a subsequent operation on Friday pushed the cumulative tally to at least 10 incidents and no fewer than 43 deaths since September, underscoring the shift from law enforcement interdictions toward lethal military force at sea. The Pentagon said the objective is to deny traffickers the use of maritime routes. In parallel, the U.S. Coast Guard reports seizing more than 50 tons of cocaine in the Eastern Pacific since early August. Several Latin American governments have expressed concern about escalation and legal ramifications, while others have voiced support for stronger action against transnational crime.
Someone please explain to CNN the difference between a ship and a speedboat.
This isn't an attack on countries, it's an attack on drug trafficking. These journalists are too soft-minded. Even if you put all 3 together, they wouldn't make half a journalist. CNN is becoming as bad as Blobalixo. Ask how many mothers are suffering as their addicted children lose their lives in Brazil and around the world.
Just think, if this were done all over the world, wouldn't it reduce the number of drug dealers?
Let Trump work.
The targets were identified and neutralized successfully. What more do you expect? You can't negotiate with terrorists.
The hard part is watching another country fight drug cartels, while South American nations remain too lax to act as they should.
You'd have to be an idiot to think fishermen actually use those kinds of boats.
Are they journalists or janitors? They sure know how to clean things up, huh?
Turkey drives aid access and ceasefire monitoring in Gaza. Turkey has moved to the center of Gaza diplomacy, positioning itself as a guarantor of the ceasefire's implementation rather than a military actor on the ground. Ankara has stepped up shuttle diplomacy with Qatar, Egypt, and Western partners, pressing for strict adherence to the truce, verified access for aid convoys, and concrete benchmarks for restoring essential services. Turkish agencies continue to channel relief through approved crossings from Egypt, while officials warn that current deliveries remain below humanitarian needs. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has publicly urged allied capitals to use leverage to deter violations and to pair short-term de-escalation with a broader political track. Turkish officials say any sustainable arrangement must include credible monitoring, accountability for attacks on civilians, and a pathway toward governance that prevents Gaza from being used to launch future attacks. At the same time, Ankara has ruled out deploying troops as long as key stakeholders object, arguing its comparative advantage lies in mediation, oversight, and logistics. The focus, Turkish diplomats say, is to lock in the ceasefire's gains before winter and shield civilians while longer-term negotiations proceed.
Praise be to God.
It's natural that some Middle Eastern countries want to eliminate Hamas, as they see it as a dangerous element in the region, something that could spread instability if not removed.
Glory be to God. Let's support Turkey in upholding humanity and Palestine's independence.
Greetings. Hello Turkey. If they stubbornly refuse to stop the war, there's no problem for you to deal with them. Turkey. Keep going Turkey, peace above all. Come on. It's time for the Indonesian military, TNI, to enter Gaza to maintain peace.
Awesome. Bravo, Turkey.
Praise be to God. As an Islamic country, Turkey should help other Islamic nations.
Come on, Turkey, keep helping Palestine, especially the people of Gaza, so they can live freely. Free Palestine.
Great job, Turkish forces.
Russian forces strike Kyiv. Trump hesitates on Tomahawk missile delivery. Russian forces carried out a large-scale overnight missile and drone barrage against Kyiv on Wednesday, October 22, igniting fires and damaging residential buildings across several districts. Local officials reported at least 2 fatalities and dozens of injuries as debris fell and emergency crews battled blazes, with updated counts still shifting amid continuing assessments. The strike followed fresh warnings from President Vladimir Putin, who said Russia would deliver a very serious, if not overwhelming, response if US-made Tomahawk cruise missiles were used to strike Russian territory. President Volodymyr Zelensky has pressed allies for additional long-range capabilities, arguing they could alter battlefield dynamics and impose real costs on the Kremlin. President Donald Trump has signaled hesitation over providing Tomahawks, citing the system's complexity and the extensive training required before effective use. Advisors say Washington is weighing escalation risks alongside Ukraine's urgent operational needs. As winter approaches and attacks on energy infrastructure intensify, Kyiv is bracing for renewed pressure on the grid while Ukraine's partners debate whether and how to expand long-range strike options in the months ahead.
This shows why it's important for people to choose leaders who understand geopolitics. This is what happens when clowns are made leaders.
A comedian is chosen as president, a very clear example for the whole world. People must be wise in choosing leaders.
Gas should not be delayed. Firm and dignified. That's Father Putin.
Russia seems likely to follow the path of the Soviet Union, which collapsed before it.
Don't hesitate. Russia gives you the real answer with nukes.
Under pressure.
U.S. forces conduct new anti-drug operation near Colombia. The U.S. military has expanded its anti-drug campaign to the Eastern Pacific for the first time, with 2 strikes on October 22 killing a total of 5 suspected traffickers after 7 earlier operations in the Caribbean. War Secretary Pete Hegseth said the boats were linked to transnational narco-terrorists, and vowed that there would be no refuge or pardon. Later that day, a 9th strike in the Eastern Pacific was confirmed. On October 24, a 10th operation in the Caribbean raised the cumulative death toll to at least 43 since early September. President Donald Trump has asserted broad authority to wage a non-international armed conflict against cartels and has not ruled out future land operations. Tensions with Colombia intensified after Trump labeled President Gustavo Petro a drug leader and announced cuts to U.S. assistance. Washington has since imposed sanctions on Petro and several family members, deepening the diplomatic rift. The Pentagon has augmented its regional posture, signaling that maritime interdictions could continue alongside political and economic pressure as Washington seeks to disrupt drug networks across Latin America.
Good for you. Give it to them.
This lefty correspondent always in favor of the narcos.
Petro says they are helpless, humble, poor fishermen.
I do not understand why there is such tension. Yes, here in Colombia we are happy because the only one who is sad is Gustavo Petro because he is a friend of the criminals.
I think it is very good that I have already taken action, and if it were in Mexico it would be very good because Mexico is in terror and one cannot live in peace. This journalist apparently defends the narcos, just like Claudia. We are in bad shape, but that's what they pay him for.
People like the President of Mexico who support the narcos and do not investigate the murders that happen. Every day in Mexico. Example Valeria Marquez and this SRA with her zombie voice never manage the laws to put in jail the murderers and the violent that make Mexico unsafe. That's how the communists work. Excellent work by President Donald Trump.
Russia ready for dialogue amid new U.S. sanctions, summit postponement. Russia signaled it remains open to contacts with the U.S. State Department this week even as Washington unveiled sweeping sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil. On October 23, Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova called the measures entirely counterproductive, while stressing Moscow's readiness to keep discussing parameters for a Ukraine settlement. The move followed President Donald Trump's decision around October 21 to 22 to put a planned summit with President Vladimir Putin in Budapest on hold, citing a lack of conditions for productive talks. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed no date has been set. Russian officials denounced the energy sanctions. Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chair of Russia's Security Council, likened them to an act of war, underscoring the depth of the rift. Substantive gaps remain over a ceasefire in Ukraine. The Trump administration has urged an immediate halt to fighting, arguing it would create space for negotiations. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has countered that an instant truce would not deliver lasting results. With sanctions escalating and diplomacy stalled, both sides say dialogue should continue, but neither has offered a timeline for rescheduling a leaders' meeting.
Ukraine was bombed. They say this with their mouths and then attack. I don't trust them at all.
If we're in a state of war, we can provide Tomahawks.
I guess these sanctions are really working.
I'm sick of the usual Russian MO again.
Leave Russia alone because it cannot be trusted.
Russia doesn't keep its promises. I've always decided everything right away, so it's great to be able to wait.
You realize now, Trump, that the Russians don't keep their promises, and we all know it.
Japan families voice concern as new PM reviews overtime regulations. Families of victims of karoshi are voicing renewed alarm after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who took office on October 21, 2025, asked Health, Labor and Welfare Minister Kenichiro Ueno to explore easing working hour restrictions. Labor groups and bereaved families warn the move risks reviving high-risk, life-destroying work styles. Japan's work style reform framework currently caps overtime at 45 hours per month and 360 per year in principle, with statutory ceilings of 720 hours annually, under 100 hours in any single month including holidays, and an average of 80 hours over 2 to 6 months. Critics say any relaxation would undercut hard-won safeguards introduced after high-profile karoshi and overwork-related suicides. Yukimi Takahashi, mother of Dentsu employee Matsuri Takahashi, whose 2015 death became a national reckoning, urged the government to strengthen enforcement rather than deregulate, noting many workers cannot refuse superiors' demands. Unions similarly argue that employee choice is often illusory without robust limits and oversight, and they call for improved compliance and penalties instead of loosening caps.
You're protesting to the wrong person, Dentsu. Certainly it is wrong to force people to work and drive them away, but I want people to understand that the logistics industry and other industries are supported by people who want to work and who have such people working for them.
The mass media, which has to pursue Dentsu harshly, is unable to even report criticism of the company's pursuit because of the discovery process.
I don't mean to be heartless, but don't forget that some people want to work.
Please knock Dentsu for this.
This is not a problem of long hours, but of the company.
Aren't you putting Dentsu, a black-owned company, and the government together?
All you have in your head is zero hundreds.
He said his work hours have increased as a result of working less and doing side jobs.
Bear attack kills 1, injures 3 in Akita Prefecture. A bear attacked 4 people in Higashinoru's Akita Prefecture late Friday morning, October 24, near Taguchi, a mixed residential forest area roughly 200 to 300 meters west of the village office. 2 victims were airlifted by doctor helicopter and 2 were taken by village ambulance. Police said 3 victims, 2 men and 1 woman, sustained serious injuries to the head and face. A man in his 30s later died at the hospital. Authorities believe 2 people were attacked while working in a field, and 2 others were injured when they rushed to help. Hunters subsequently culled a female Asiatic black bear about 1.2 meters long near the site. Officials are examining whether it was the same animal involved in the attacks. They have urged residents to avoid farm edges and forest trails, carry bells or other noisemakers, and report sightings immediately while patrols continue in the surrounding woods. Local authorities noted that bear encounters in the prefecture had already been rising this year before Friday's fatality. They cautioned that any relaxation in vigilance could lead to additional incidents as autumn food shortages drive bears closer to human settlements.
The government needs to do something about this. Let's place all the people who called to complain in Akita. I am sure they will become friends and let us go back to the mountains. Maybe we should conduct a massive cleanup operation to reduce the number of bears and at the same time show the bears the boundary between humans and bears. Let the judge who revoked your permit to carry a gun get you. Let the guy who put the restrictions on the hunting party take the blame.
Exterminate them, reward the hunters well. So many people are harmed every day and nothing is done. Humans are no longer scary and there are fewer places for bears to live, and the only way to reduce their numbers is to reduce their numbers. I'm sorry it's the humans' fault, but I don't want to die from a bear attack.
The bear must have recognized the human as bait.
It's an anomaly.
They've gone from not approaching humans to attacking them when they see them, and that's just too dangerous.
It is as if random assaults are occurring every day.
Gaza holds funerals for returned bodies. Funerals were held this week in Khan Yunis for 54 unidentified Palestinians whose bodies were returned by Israel under the recent ceasefire. Forensic workers at Nasser Medical Complex said many remains were severely decomposed and mutilated, complicating identification. Gaza's government media office alleged some bodies showed signs of torture and field execution. and called for an independent international investigation. Israel has returned additional remains in recent days, with reports indicating that the overall number handed back since the ceasefire began on October 10 has grown into the hundreds. Humanitarian conditions remain dire. Displaced families continue to shelter in makeshift sites amid extensive damage to homes and essential infrastructure. Satellite-based assessments indicate that in Gaza City roughly 4/5 of structures are damaged, underscoring the scale of reconstruction needs, while water and sanitation systems have suffered widespread disruption. Relief agencies say deliveries have increased since the truce took effect but remain well below requirements. Local authorities urged families to provide DNA samples to aid identification and appealed to international bodies to preserve evidence and support forensic work as more remains are processed and laid to rest.
It's ironic that Netanyahu and Hitler will occupy the same chapter in the history books.
Laying bare what it means to be human. Never seen such drive to live. Disgusting of us to watch this powerless. Thank you, Hind, I treasure you.
The strange thing is that despite all these crimes, instead of holding the occupier and the criminal accountable, those who call themselves mediators seek to blackmail the victim and deprive him of the right to resist the aggression. What kind of logic is this?
Britain should pay a compensation for establishing a legal entity on a stolen land.
Talking will not stop Israel to commit more crimes. Recognition of a Palestinian state, no more UN vetoes and no more weapons for this is the least the US can do. Free Palestine and its neighbors from that rogue and genocidal state. Ignore the Hasbara bunch, they are running out of excuses for Israel's crimes.
Horrific. History will judge the lunatic.
God's wrath will be cataclysmic for this terrible injustice. When a graveyard becomes part of daily life, it's not just tragedy, it's a sign the world has stopped learning. Now the world needs to fulfill its promises to bring a little bit of goodness into the lives of these people.